Okay, cool. All right. So I think I'm recording now. Yeah, I think we're good. So the goal of first of all, it's good to see you guys. And obviously you'll get those two CP3 points. And like I said, you don't need to share your video if it doesn't make you feel comfortable or whatever. That's fine. And the goal for this Zoom workshop is really just to um, give you a little introduction, open up a place where we can have a conversation. You can ask questions about this new module. To be honest with you guys, when I actually had talked to about I think it was three students in sort of like one-on-one Zoom appointments, and I told them that I was thinking about. I mean, this was actually kind of in place at the start of the semester. I just wasn't sure how it was going to come together, and I wanted to see how our class went to see if it was a good idea. But when I told a couple of students, like, I think I'm planning on just letting you guys choose your topic, like it was going to be wide open for the third module, every single one of those students, all three of them, opened their eyes and looked at me like I was absolutely insane. Um, in other words, or I guess maybe that's a little hyperbolic, but they basically were like, whoa, that's intense. So I am aware that allowing you allowing you guys to choose your own topic can be, can bring anxiety. Like, my God, I have to figure that out. I mean, I already have to write a paper. Do you have to make me choose what I'm going to write about? That's why there is the M3 icon assignment that you can choose, you can opt to do. So if you would rather not go through the process of trying to find your own topic, your own focus, all that stuff, which is what I'm going to talk primarily about today. Though I think it'll also be useful. It's also going to be useful no matter what you're writing. If you're writing about a cultural icon, it's going to be useful for that too. It's not like this is just about those who are choosing to choose their own topic. So if that is something that makes you anxious, same thing goes for the video essay. You have the video essay option, and we'll talk about that, and I'll open it up for questions about that. If creating a video essay, and I'll describe a little bit what that looks like, though there's a much more detailed description in the M3 video essay link in Canvas in our third module. If that freaks you out too, if that creates anxiety, it's obviously a time of high anxiety right now, then don't do that. Stick with the traditional written essay format. So really the whole choice thing is really up to you guys, whether or not you want to sort of take that on. And it's relative, right? For some people, that's a lot more extra work. For some people, it's not. So, do the thing that's best for you, considering the context, considering us really just trying to get the most we can out of these unique circumstances. Do what you think's best for you. I mean, happily, in glancing over the topic brainstorm discussion board, I haven't had a chance to dive in there and really get in replies and stuff like that. Our replies aren't due to that till the end of tomorrow night. But just glancing over it, it seems like most of you, even those of you who are choosing to do icon, which is absolutely perfectly fine. It's not like people get bonus points for choosing their own topic. It seems like a lot of you have interest in, are brainstorming through some of your own topics. Some of you are brainstorming different icons. So really a lot of really interesting stuff. It's satisfying for me, and I know this isn't all about me, but it's just really nice to see you guys writing about things, ideally that you give a shit about, that you care about, right? Things where your critical analysis abilities, your critical thinking, your ability to analyze, your ability to develop arguments are being used towards something that you care about or that you have some sort of investment in. So that's really my goal here. And obviously not obviously, but my goal isn't to give you more work, excuse me, because that's why I'm sort of giving you that caveat. If the choice of topic makes sense, the goal there was to, give you an opportunity to write about something you really care about. If that seems like more work to you, then stick with the M3 icon. The thing that needs to happen for this paper, no doubt, is you need to write a new critical analysis and argument. The reason I say is I had a couple students ask, like, hey, can I write my paper on the hippies again? Or can I write? No. We need to generate a new argumentative analysis, whether you're doing the video essay or whether you're doing the written essay. So I'll talk about that as well, but that should be fairly clear. The goal by the end of this week, we have replies to this topic brainstorm discussion board that are due by the end of tomorrow night. Reply to 2 your peers, usual case scenario. If you want extra points, you can reply to more than that in terms of the CP3 points. We have a post that's due by the end of Friday night, and that post is called Snapshot Plan. It's basically, I hope and I want and I expect for you guys by the end of Friday night with that post to have a sense of what your focus is going to be, your topic and focus is for your paper or your video essay, and what medium you're going to develop it in. You know, so the choice of mediums, which we'll talk about a little bit, is obviously between the traditional written central claim, subclaim driven essay, the medium that we've been working in this whole time, or you might have done a multimodal project in 105, you may not have, or you might have done some sort of presentation in 105. The other option for medium is a video essay, and like I said, I'll talk a little bit about that. So let me get right to, I think, can you guys see my screen in terms of like the M3 overview PowerPoint thing? Okay, cool. At any time during this will probably take about 45 minutes. And then I want to leave it open for questions. This thing's gonna, I set it to stop at 3, I think. No, not 3, sorry, 3:30. Oh my gosh, I hope I set it to stop at 3:30. Maybe it'll shut down. Anyways, it should stop at 3:30. If we get interrupted, I will restart it and blah, 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 but we should be fine. So we'll go to about 3:30, but this should take me about 40 minutes. And then I want to open it up for questions. But if you have any questions, you want me to slow down, you want me to stop, feel free to speak up or raise your hand or whatever, just get my attention and I'll be happy to stop and slow down. So in terms of M3 overview, what exactly is this last writing assignment? What are we doing? What's going on here? I'm going to take a little bit of time to sort of explain this. The first thing is just to think about the context of where you're at in terms of your writing at Montclair State University. And there's going to be a few theoretical things to start and then we'll get really pragmatic, I promise. What I'm doing is not asking you to write something completely different than what you've been doing before. You're not allowed, I'm going to be the boss here, but you know, this is a class about developing critical analysis and critical argument. That's what you're doing, whether you're doing it in a video essay or whether you're doing it in a traditional written essay. You're not writing a personal essay, you're not writing a literacy narrative, you're not writing a personal narrative. You're writing a central claim, subclaim driven argument and analysis. So like I said, this is something that you've been practicing through 105 and now in 106, right? This is, you know, hopefully you have a little bit of a sense of what central claims are about, what introductions are about, subclaims, all that stuff, analysis. So you have that method. That's a method we've been practicing and developing through both these classes. Now I want you to sort of understand and practice the ability to take that method and apply it to whatever you want, right? Obviously, after you leave this class, I'm no longer going to be giving you, and you might not ever get assigned a central claim driven critical analysis prompt, right? Write a paper about a subculture. I'm sure you'll have other classes where you write papers. Maybe some of them will be asking for arguments and analysis. But the goal here is like, well, now that you have these skills, what good is a central claim skill or a subclaim skill or analytical skill, critical thinking skills beyond this class? So that's part of the goal is, well, okay, so now take these things and apply it to what you want to write about. I mean, you've had some freedom to what you want to write about. You know, I'd give you a general topic, subcultures or non-traditional narratives. So you've had a lot of choice in that realm already. You're somewhat used to being able to choose your own focus. So that's really what this is about. So this last assignment, these quotes are just directly from the actual M3 overview. This last assignment asks you to put your critical thinking and writing skills to work in service of something that you care about. Of course, like I said, you can always write. And that could be the icon prompt if you want. So the genre is critical analysis and argument. Same thing, right? It needs to be a central claim and subclaim driven argumentative analysis, whether you're doing the video essay or the written essay. So you have a choice of topic, and that you could just decide to write on the icon topic and choose a focus within that. Like I think Derek was, you know, Derek, I think you talked about Michael Jackson. Again, I looked at it real quick. You were like talking about Michael Jackson and who else?
I talked about Dave Chappelle and Michael Jackson.
Okay, yeah. Actually, I think two really interesting possible foci, if you will, for a paper. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think I might lean more towards, my instinct would be to lean more towards possibly Dave Chappelle, but at the same time, I think you could make a paper about either one, but we'll talk. So we'll get to that.
I saw that you posted like Dave Chappelle as a like a idea in the first post, and I thought it was cool because I like Dave Chappelle a lot, and then like I watched his Mark Twain thing, which was cool. So and like
Yeah.
he talks a lot about social issues and like ties it with comedy and like is real. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting one. And I'll talk about, I'm not going to have really time to talk about everybody's topic ideas. I'll get into the discussion board and do some of that, but, and also you guys can set up an appointment with me if you'd like to talk about that in terms of developing your focus, your topics. But yeah, but I will talk a little bit about how do we focus our topic, and how do we make sure that it's going to lead to an interesting argument. So I'll get at that. So back here, we have that choice, like I said, between the medium of the written essay or the video essay. You obviously are familiar with what the written essay should be. I've kept the written essay requirements the same as the written essay requirements for the RD2, meaning it's, normally we would be going up to 1,800 words, but we're going to keep it at 1,500. I'm going to keep it at 3 sources, 2 of them academic, scholarly sources, meaning scholarly articles from academic journals. All those things are going to be the same. I think I even just left off the snapshots thing for the third essay. So instead of us going bigger and more research, I kept it to the same requirements as 2, considering the circumstances. So obviously the written essays primary modes we're all familiar with, right? It's the written word, sentence, paragraph, central claims, subclaims, so on and so forth. The video essay obviously is using imagery, graphic design, and narration to develop its argument and analysis. This doesn't mean that if you decide to do the video essay that you're not going to have a central claim, or they're not going to have subclaims. You're essentially doing the same thing, excuse me, but you're doing it in a different medium, right? So, evidence and examples are going to probably circle more around sort of images rather than, long textual descriptions. So a couple things about the video essay. Let me sort of pause and talk a little bit about that now, since we know what the written essay is. The video essay, like I said, does need to be central claim driven, and it is expected you have a central claim in the actual video essay. It also needs to be subclaim driven. You're expected that you have a sense of subclaims, right, in each for each of your analysis slides. But let me say a couple things about the video essay. Number one is that you do not need to be like hyper proficient with technology. It's not expected that you can create some beautifully orchestrated iMovie, you don't need, editing skills or anything like that. Even if you have those skills, like, how to put together, and I don't even know the language for this, but let's say you know how to use, video software and video development software like a pro, that's not going to give you like, your grade is not going to be based on, it will be based partially on the clarity of the prose, right? Which is to say, in the case of a video essay, are your slides clear, easy to look at? They're not filled with text. Are the slides, some way, in the same way that we sort of evaluated when we were doing the in-class presentation, same like that. But you do not need to have a super technical ability. It's not expected to have that. The other thing is to keep in mind with a video essay is the minimum requirements are that you have, I believe it's 6 to 8 slides. Needs to be a minimum of 8 minutes, maximum of 10 minutes. So what that means is that you need to use some sort of slide presentation software and then record a narration over the top of that. PowerPoint, Google Slides, all the sort of slide development software allows you, or there's ways to record narration on it. And the reason you're doing that is because it needs to be, right, this is an asynchronous thing in the sense that you're going to be recording a presentation essentially, right? We're not in class, obviously, to do this. This is actually an assignment that I do normally in my online classes, my hybrid classes. It's not like I invented the video essay, number one, and it's not like I invented the video essay because we moved to online. I did make it more part of our class because we couldn't do, everybody couldn't do presentations anymore, but that's why we're doing the invention post. Okay, so anyways, video essay. I will, for those who decide to do a video essay, why do a video essay? Well, it might be more appealing to you. They're really good skills to have. In other words, being able to put together a presentation and recording a video for a presentation is something that is a really, not only is it sort of oral presentation skills, but understanding how a presentation works. I mean, when it comes to critical analysis, critical thinking, oftentimes you're going to be presenting things, whether you're presenting you're pitching an album to a record company, you're proposing. I mean, my wife, who works in fashion, is constantly having to propose fashion lines to the CEOs and the CFOs and whoever the heck her bosses, right? So having that ability is really valuable. It's kind of partially a visual rhetoric, obviously. So you need a PowerPoint or some sort of slide presentation. If you know how to use video and do all that stuff, you're welcome to do that. But a PowerPoint is just fine. 6 to 8 slides. There's going to be an introduction and central claim. There's going to be like 3 analysis slides, and then there's going to be a kind of question slide, a sense of conclusion and questions. So you'll need to use imagery, graphic design, but nothing like that. It's not expected that you have professional style. If you look at that video essay, obviously look at the video essay assignment. It's called M3 video essay in the M3 module. You'll see that I've provided student examples of things that I've done before. And those student examples, all 3 of them, I think, were A-level presentations. So those are really effective video essays, I should say. I also included 3 professional examples. I included the professional examples not to imply that's what's expected. By no means is that the case. They're professional examples. These are people who make videos for a living. They were just there, I said, and I sort of disclaim this, that they're there to sort of give you a sense of inspiration, to see that the video essay, if you will, is a genre that's actually been around since video. I mean, in some sense, they're kind of like documentary films, but they're obviously a kind of less complex medium than documentary film. So that's the video essay. It will still need to be center claim driven, subclaim driven. You'll need details, examples, and evidence. It's just that they get translated a little differently when you're dealing with a video essay, a visual medium, rather, or predominantly visual medium as opposed to a written medium. Any questions about that video essay? Even if they're obvious questions, basic questions, concerns. Okay, keep in mind that, and I apologize if I mentioned this already, Friday, we have another discussion board. I think it's our last discussion board outside of the invention post next week. It's our last discussion board class, really, that's coming from me. And that Friday, the post is all about deciding on what your focus is going to be for whatever, as well as stating what your medium you're going to use. Because once, if you select to do a video essay, I'm going to group you with the video essay people. And obviously, I'm going to be sharing suggestions for how to create video essays with you guys, that group, as opposed to the other group that's going to be in written essays. So it'll be a little bit different. We'll still be doing things like, if you're doing a video essay, it's going to be all essentially the same. It's a little bit different in the sense that you're going to be doing a workshop draft of your video essay, which will probably look more like a sort of outline or plan for the video, as well as some example slides. So it'll be a little bit different, but really the same sort of schedule of assignments. Okay, so if there are any questions about that, and if you think of questions, I'll sort of leave the last few minutes of this open to questions. So how do I make this happen? How do I get this done? Like I said, I'm going to start off a little theoretically. You're doing the same thing that you have been doing, which is that you're developing a critical analysis. And by critical, and I've mentioned this in class before, but by critical, that doesn't mean that you're criticizing something. You're not pointing out a work's flaws or arguing why it's objectionable. It is objectionable, excuse me. You're not just criticizing something. A critical analysis is different. Critical means that you're actually carrying through with some sort of in-depth thought, right? You're doing what we have been doing or working towards doing, right? So critical argument and analysis must do 2 important things. It must account for society within a historical context. So some of this is going to be quite wordy, but you should recognize some of these things. It should seek to dig deeper or dig deep beneath the surface of social life. And it should try to uncover the assumptions that keep human beings from an understanding of how the real world works or the world works. Now, to put this in the language that we've been using, you've heard me talk a lot about that when we're writing critical analysis, you've got to set up context in your introduction. So you're not just talking about racism in society, you're talking about racism in the 21st century, or you're talking about racism in relation to, how the Black Panthers fought against racism in the 1960s, right? So context, it's about a specific thing, and it's about a specific time period, and it's about a specific social issue. It's also in depth. Obviously, we know that well. You've probably heard more than you want to hear from me about getting more details, more depth. Um, it often goes beyond the regular assumptions we have of something, right? You remember when we were talking about, like, let's say, like the focus of hippies in our subculture paper. The idea of the subculture paper wasn't just to report on what you learned about the hippies, because most often that's going to lead to sort of common knowledge, right? So everybody knows the hippies sort of like protested the war and peace, love, and whatever, right? If I was going to write a paper on the hippies, I need to sort of dig deeper than that, right? Or if I did write, sorry, we're not writing about subcultures anymore, but I need to tell something that we don't know or that isn't sort of common knowledge about that subculture. And then finally, these papers, your critical analysis and argument, should have some sort of social value, have some sort of social effect, right? And this is me constantly saying, so what is the consequence of this? What is the significance of this? Why does this matter in terms of our society? This is why we're always talking about social issues, because the goal of these papers is to make meaning. There's all this phenomena in the world, right? I mean, just look at the discussion board that you guys just did. I mean, whether it's Michael Jackson or Ramadan or the theater or musical therapy, or there's all these things in the world. What our job is to sort of really dive in deep in terms of what they are and how they work, as well as tell our audience why they're meaningful. Why are they important? Why is Dave Chappelle important in terms of race relations in our society, right? Why is musical therapy so effective in terms of why is The Little Mermaid meaningful in terms of what it says about gender and femininity, right? So that's why we're always using those social issues, is because that's the bridge between cultural phenomena and our society and how our society works. Okay, so let me get a little bit away from the sort of more theoretical stuff, and let's get a little more pragmatic here. You're going to see a lot of times, and we've talked a little bit about this, but you're going to see throughout this, it's just about 3 o'clock. I hope this thing doesn't stop. If it does, I'll restart it and make sure I invite you all, but we should be good till 3:30. I just don't trust myself. I'm not, I click the wrong button all the time. What is the difference between topic and focus? You're going to see a lot of times that I'm using this language just to give you an initial sense. You probably have an initial sense of what these things mean in terms of our previous papers, right? A focus is more specific than a topic. A topic is the general subject of an analysis, right? It's what, so for example, subculture, right? So I would often, with our previous papers, I would give you a topic like subculture. You would pick out a focus like, the Black Panthers, the drill rap or whatever it might be. Part of topic can also be related to the social issue like gender, right? Which is really broad. There's a lot of more focused things to talk about in relation to gender, femininity, masculinity, third genders. Oops, sorry, I think I clicked on the wrong thing here. I was trying to get cute and I found it up. Whoa. Okay. So focus is a more specific subject within a topic. So Riot Girl, in terms of being a more specific focus in relation to the subcultures, or femininity being a more specific notion of gender. Okay, so that sort of seems obvious, but I thought it was important to sort of point that out. Our goal is to search for, while in our topic brainstorm, some of you are working already towards a more focused thing, like, Michael Jackson is I'm going to keep using this example, or Dave Chappelle is a pretty good focus. There is a way to focus that even more, which I'll talk about in a second. But in some cases, some of you are just writing about a general topic, like, and that's fine. But we want to move towards a place where we're talking about a focus. So a focus is a combination of a specific focus, like Riot Girl, as well as a sort of social issue or issues, like a few of those. So I took a couple random in skimming over the discussion board, just took a couple general topics, theater and therapy. Now, for the scope of our essays, it's important to keep in mind the scope of our essays. We're writing essays that are going to have probably 3, maybe 4 subclaim driven analysis paragraphs in them. We're not writing books. We're not even writing, I'm not discrediting what we're doing. What we're doing, I think, is really important, really valuable. But in terms of thinking about how do I properly focus my topic, I need to keep in mind the scope of my paper, right? Maybe you could write a book about the theater, but that's going to be a long book. Are you talking about maybe theater in the 21st century, maybe? Theater in the modernist theater, maybe? Okay. But if you're writing about modernist theater or theater in general or therapy in general for a 3-paragraph analysis paragraph essay, that's going to be too broad. It's going to be inevitable that you're going to have to like paint with really broad strokes. So we need to focus that. So taking something like theater, let's say I have an interest in theater. I want to write about that. It's one of the topics I'm interested in. I want to narrow that down a little bit. So narrow down to a specific show and or connect to a specific social issue. So, right, maybe I want to talk about theater and how it like educates us about ethics or educates people, teaches them about ethics and morality, right? That gives me a little bit more of an approach, a little bit more of a focus. Even more so though, maybe I want to write about the show, the Broadway show Rent. And this is kind of a bad example because I've never seen Rent. I really have no idea what Rent is about, but I was just pulling an example on the top of my head. But let's say I want to talk about the show Rent and how the actual show critiques poverty and class structure in our society. I have no idea if it does. Let's just using this for the sake of example. Usually, almost particularly with narratives, even social issues that seem to be barely there, you can usually develop something about it, but that's a whole nother story. So, but just for this example, in my opinion, it's easier to write, and you've heard me say this in a different context before, but in my opinion, it's easier to think about writing and develop the essay on the right, the Rent and critique of poverty. And the reason I say that is because when I have that focus of the show Rent, and obviously if I've seen that show, then elements will start popping into my mind pretty quickly, hopefully, about like, well, what could I say about that Rent show? Well, oh yeah, there's this scene that seems to, indirectly reference poverty. There's this character that is really poor and this character that's really rich. There's this song in the play or the Broadway show that references wealth. There's, whatever it might be. Just like when Derek and I had that quick exchange about Dave Chappelle, he mentioned like the Mark Twain thing, and he was already mentioning things, already thinking of things that maybe he could write about in relation to that more focused category of Dave Chappelle, instead of saying like, well, stand-up comedy. Well, that's really broad. So that's why I would say like the more focused you are, the more narrow you are, the more, not only the more distinct your paper will be, but it also, I think, makes life a lot easier. It's easier for me to come up with multiple elements in relation to Rent and how it talks about poverty or class than it is to come up, entering this huge space of theater in general is really difficult. So Tia, you were sort of the inspiration for the therapy thing, and you weren't just writing about therapy in general, you were talking about specific things, but I wanted to use, so this isn't like a response to your post. I thought you were well on your way to writing about 2 different kinds of therapy. In fact, I kind of use it as an example. So again, with therapy is probably too broad all by itself, but maybe I want to talk about art-based therapy and how it's helpful to children in particular. I'm probably putting words in your mouth, Tia, but I just also want to give credit to the example. But you were talking about musical therapy, and I know that's something you do, and then I added the PTS thing, or I could focus in on musical therapy and how it helps people with PTSD or something like that, or even veterans who have PTSD and how musical therapy is being used to help them. Maybe that's too focused. I don't know. I have to sort of feel that out and make sure that it'll work. But the idea here is that a general topic like theater or therapy is going to is a good start, right? Okay, I'm really interested in this thing. I'm really interested in stand-up comedy. Okay, well, let's focus in on somebody, Dave Chappelle, and then what do you think Dave Chappelle teaches us about race relations in our society or racism in our society? So I'm gonna, not that Dave Chappelle only talks about racism. He obviously talks about all kinds of things. Um, but we're talking about finding, three elements that I can say, this is what Dave Chappelle does that helps us think about race in a distinct way. Or this is what Dave Chappelle does that helps us think about relationships and marriage and family in a distinct way. Or these are the things that Dave Chappelle uses for his comedy in order to get us to think about political activism and fighting against, the man, so to speak, whatever it might be. This is the things that we're, so those things will help me focus my topic a little bit more. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. Sorry, I just keep hitting the wrong buttons. Okay, this is the last slide. And then we can sort of, I moved that fairly quickly. So we moved through that fairly quickly, but right after I get through this slide, I'll just sort of open it up for questions, or if you wanted to have, I don't know, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your ideas, then we could do that too. I'll make sure when I open it up for questions, you can stick around. Not everybody has to stay if they don't have any questions, but let me get through this slide. We'll be done with the lesson. We'll open up for questions for everybody, and then I can stay a little longer if people want to talk about their specific topics. So how do I know if my focus will make for an effective argument and analysis? So it's one thing, right, to be like, aha, okay, cool. I want to write about this movie Repo Man, and I want to talk about it in relation to class, in relation to sort of like career opportunities and how the lower class gets sort of cut out of society and is forced into lives of crime or something like that. Okay, so I don't know, is that going to work? And sometimes they don't, right? When I start thinking about, so once I have once I focus and narrow down my focus with a social issue and have a more specific focus, I need to sort of ask myself questions about whether or not that's going to make for an effective argument or analysis. So one way that I do that is sort of what I call sort of testing for viability. Is this thing going to hold water? Is this thing going to actually make for a contentious or a sort of insightful argumentative analysis? And I'm going to bring back those sort of three things that I mentioned that a critical analysis does, right? It should be contextual. It should be, in other words, it should be talking about a specific aspect of society. It should be focused, as well as it should be addressing some sort of, social issue and the context of that social issue. It should be in depth. It should challenge. It should move beyond sort of common knowledge, and it should also be making some point about society. So I'm going to put up a bunch of questions here. It's going to be a lot of text. But this is, again, just a process of pre-writing. I will be posting this PowerPoint to Canvas as well as this recorded video to Canvas, so you don't need to write all these down. And this is just me sort of brainstorming these last night, to be honest with you. I was trying to imagine what questions I have whenever I'm writing about something and what I ask myself when I say, like, will this make for a good analysis or argument? So there's going to be a bunch, okay? But don't freak out. It's not like you need to memorize these. There's not going to be no quiz on these. These are just different ways of trying to figure out how I can test the viability of my focus, right, for a particular analysis before I go and write a paper on it and realize, like, oh shit, I'm not able to do this. So will my argument or analysis provide an in-depth analysis of at least three elements of the focus? So that's actually this first one. I'm going to take a second with this because I'm going to move through the other ones a little quickly. There's a lot of overlap here. One thing to ask yourself is, like, okay, so let's say I have the focus of the movie Repo Man. It's probably a movie that nobody's seen. It was like from 1976 or something. But let's say I have the focus of this film, Repo Man. I immediately want to ask myself, like, am I going to be able to pull three things out of that film that I feel relate to poverty in this case, or social class, or class structure in our society. And if I can't, I mean, obviously, I want to go back and probably watch the film again and take notes as I watch it, and like write down things like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about this scene, totally forgot about this moment of dialogue. It's not like the whole movie is going to address that constantly. But so if I can't find at least three elements from my focus, then it's probably not going to work. And to give you an example of this, it's not like, I mean, I think it's somewhat uncommon that you can't find at least three things to say related to a particular issue about your focus. But some cases you can. Let me give you an example. I had a student this is a couple years ago. We were doing a version of the non-traditional essay, in fact, but they were supposed to be writing about kind of fairy tales and children's stories. And she wanted to write about this children's song. It's not really a nursery rhyme. I guess it's kind of a nursery rhyme. Doesn't matter. It's the song that goes, it's crazy, right? It's totally bizarre. It's like, mommy, mommy finger, where are you? Daddy finger, daddy finger. I don't know why it's fingers. It's very creepy. It's weird. It's a weird song. So she wanted to write this paper, and I think it was for like a module 2 essay. So it was like, well, you're going to need at least, 3 support paragraphs. And there's not much to the song. And so she was really struggling. Like, so I guess I could write about like the fingers things. Like, okay, that's one thing. And you obviously have a family. But in other words, she was really stretching. And we were, even in our conversations, it just wasn't going to work. Right? It was like, there's just not enough substance there. There's not enough to sort of bite into. Like, it's just not, it's not going to, I don't know. And then what points are you going to make? So it's about fingers. So it's teaching kids about hand, So that's one thing, is you want to make sure that there's 3 things that you think you can write about and they're substantive enough that you can write about in your analysis, right? In some cases, it's the reverse problem. Like, oh my God, there's so much I could write about. Like, if I'm talking about, how Dave Chappelle comments upon race and society, I mean, there's probably thousands upon thousands of jokes and skits and things that Dave Chappelle has done that I could connect to a social issue of talking about race or race relations. Well, then I'm going to have the challenge of choosing which ones I think are most important, and also choosing the ones that I think are related to the point I think I want to make, that I think Chappelle is teaching us about race. Like, let's say I like, okay, well, they want to focus on how Dave Chappelle makes comments about, racism within one's own race. Then maybe that's something I could do. Then I could start to choose elements based on the jokes or the sort of things that he's done that relate to that. Okay. I'll move through the other ones much more quickly, I promise. So, hey, Rashid, what's up, man? What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Welcome. I'm just finishing up here, but I'm about to open it up for questions. So if you have questions, you'll get a chance here in just a second. Will my argument or analysis provide a different or new understanding of your focus? Meaning, like, is it gonna teach us something that we don't, is it gonna teach us something about Dave Chappelle's comedy, excuse me, for example, that we didn't realize or understand before? Does it provide a different or new understanding of your social issue, right? So, with like the Little Mermaid example, I was talking about how it teaches us something sort of distinct about how gender and femininity gets defined, or how male power is reinforced. Does it allow for a further understanding of your focus or social issue beyond what's already there? And by what's already there, I mean, this is why I'm asking you to do a little bit of research for that post on Friday, is so you can, sorry, I just checked that thing. I'll come back to what that means in just a second. Okay, whatever. So do a little bit of research. So like, let's say I'm interested in writing about Repo Man. I can just go ahead and do some quick research. Has anything been written about Repo Man? In some cases, perhaps nothing. I already did it. There's been a few things written about it. Nothing really about class, nothing really about coming of age. So that's kind of good. That means that I'm going to be sort of doing something that's a little bit unique or original, right? Or let's say I go and, the thing that I told you about Little Mermaid, maybe you guys don't know about it, but it's actually something that's been written about quite a bit. So I want to sort of say to myself, okay, it's not that I couldn't write about The Little Mermaid and what it says about femininity, but I want to try and make sure I'm saying something a little distinct, right? I'm not just repeating or parroting, as in the bird. I'm not just mimicking another argument. I want to sort of have my own distinct angle. So does it provide a challenge to common assumptions about your focus into your social issue? Right. So, this goes to something about like, there's a common assumption that video games are bad for people's health. That leads to people being narcissistic. And, so, I don't want to write that argument because that's something that you hear about all the time in mainstream media. And most likely it's bullshit because, it's not mainstream media. I'm not saying it's not journalism's jobs, but it's not mainstream media's job to do in-depth, detailed analyses of things. They often sort of operate on scare tactics. They sort of play into common assumptions. Does your analysis provide an uncommon connection between your focus and a social issue? So, like, while a lot has been written about the Black Panthers in relation to how they challenged racism and how they provided sort of empowerment for African Americans, maybe I would like to look at, say, like, I'm going to actually take a look at the Black Panthers in terms of what they teach us about education, right? Because they did set up education programs and stuff like that. So I can do something a little different that way. Does it provide a new or distinct understanding of ourselves? Or does it provide a new or distinct understanding of how our society works? So you can see how some of these things are overlapping, right? So, like, I don't know, let's say I'm interested in talking about, let's say, Tia, you are writing the paper about musical therapy. And so, most people understand therapy in society and how therapy works as kind of like, I guess, the talking cure type thing, right? It's always, usually involves like you visiting a psychotherapist and having conversations and something that maybe people don't realize is that music is used for therapy, and that it's teaching us something about how therapy can work differently than what we normally assume, and that it might even be more effective using multimedia means than just that sort of, the classic TV example of sitting on the couch, so to speak. Does it provide understanding about why a certain social problem exists? So once we, by looking at the, let's say by looking at, say I'm interested in analyzing, I'll take my example of, taking my example of sort of mental health again, in terms of, let's say I'm writing about like how Demi Lovato teaches us something as a cultural icon. She's obviously, she's very involved with raising awareness about mental health issues and stuff like that, and the stigmatization that surrounds mental health, the stereotypes that surround mental illness and things like that. So in some ways, what Demi Lovato could be teaching us is that, we have such a problem with mental health in our society because we don't pay enough attention to mental health. We don't understand what mental health issues come from, or how to help treat them or treat them effectively. Or we assume that mental health issues only affect people who are of a certain class or a certain race or a certain social standing or status, right? So that would be enlightening towards why a certain social problem exists. Okay. So I would say you would want to like check at least two of these off in terms of wondering whether or not your topic is, your focus, is viable. And the reason I say two is because the first one up there that I put the red X on should be a given, right? Obviously, it might take a little research. You might be like, okay, I think I can pull this analysis of Repo Man off the film in relation to class, but I'm probably maybe initially I can only think of like one scene, but then I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch the movie. Maybe I can get a few more there, or I'm also going to do research, and maybe that'll help me develop at least elements. So you definitely want to be sure that you're going to have 3 different elements you can write about, because you're most likely going to need 3 support paragraphs. Then from there, in terms of your argument, these other sort of questions that you can sort of ask yourself. A lot of them are overlapping, and it's really just an exercise You do not have to do this. You do not have, but they're a way to sort of test out things in terms of how might your focus work for a strong or effective argument. All right, so I'm going to step out and stop sharing my screen. Give me 1 second. Takes me a moment. I'm not completely Zoom maestro here. Okay. So I guess what I'd like to first do is just open it up. We have I don't know, 8 minutes. Does anybody have any general questions that are related to what I just talked about, or just general questions about the class going forward, or anything, or you'd like me to sort of re-articulate something? A couple things that I'll mention that might be questions on your mind. Looking at the schedule ahead, we're going to reply to this topic brainstorm post by the end of tomorrow night. Beyond that, we have a post that's due Friday night that's called the snapshot plan. That is the post where you're going to sort of announce what is the topic you're writing about, your focus, as well as what medium you're going to use. Are you going to create a video essay? Are you going to create a traditional essay? Next week, we're going to have the replies to those snapshot plans, discussion board. And the next week's primarily going to be all about the invention posts and replies. So to give you some sense of that schedule, it's obviously in modules, but we're having invention posts, and it's our last round of invention posts. We have invention posts from Hui, Marie, Nick, and Derek on Tuesday night, and then replies the following night on Wednesday to all those posts, and then invention posts from Angel, Alberson, and Sarah on Thursday night, and replies to all those posts next Friday. That's next week, not this week. Gui, Marie, Nick, Derek, Angel, Alberson, and Sarah. I don't think Alberson and Sarah are here, but the topic, the focus of your invention post should be whatever you're going to be writing about in your essay or in your video essay. So just to clarify that. Beyond that, our workshop, the reason we're doing that, the reason we're doing the discussion board on Friday is the snapshot plan on Friday is the goal by the end of this week is for you guys. What's up, Jay? The goal by the end of this week is for you guys to have your focus in your head ready to go and some sort of plan. Like, I'm going to write a video essay about how the film Repo Man is making some sort of critique of class structure in our society. Or I'm going to write about how I'm going to write a traditional essay about how Dave Chappelle teaches us about racism in our society, or whatever it might be. So that post on Friday, the goal by the end of this week is to have that ready to go, because it's going to happen quick. Our workshop draft for these things, whether it's a video essay or traditional essay, that's going to be due on the 28th, which I don't even know what day of the week that is. I think that might be a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday, I think. So we're going to be moving. We're not actually necessarily any shorter. We're a little bit shorter than last module, but that's because we took an extra week or two actually last module, because we had spring break and we had an extra spring break, and then I gave you guys another week to get those papers done because of all the apocalypse. But just to put that on your radar, April 28th will be the workshop draft for this paper, whether you're doing a video essay or whether you're doing a traditional essay. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Marie, yeah.
So I'm having a hard time coming up with an original topic that relates to some sort of social issue. So I'm thinking of doing an icon or a person in pop culture.
Yeah.
When it comes to the elements, what type of elements would I be using? The different things they do for society, or like what type of elements would I use for people?
It's a good question. So it's going to be relative, of course, to who the icon is. So let's say I was doing LeBron James. Okay, LeBron James obviously plays basketball. Is a huge basketball star, but LeBron James also does all kinds of other things, right? He has his own LeBron James. I don't even know a whole lot about LeBron James, but I'm just pulling an example on the top of my head. LeBron James, I know, has like his, I don't know what it's called, but it's like his LeBron James Foundation, um, which is like a charitable foundation. He also, I think, what's that, Rashid?
He got a school.
Yeah, I was going to say he opened up a school, right, where I think it's tuition free, designed specifically for inner city kids or lower class, working class kids who don't have those opportunities normally, right? Suddenly they're in a nice school with well paid teachers and resources and books and iPads and all that. So he does that. LeBron James also does like there's something else he does. He does like he sponsors like a TV show or something. He produces a TV show.
Oh,
So
now
yeah,
he has a show.
yeah, he has a show. So there, okay. But let's say I'm doing somebody like Dave Chappelle. I mean, most of my elements are probably going to be about his comedy, but Dave Chappelle also does other things. Like he put on like block parties. He's got, even if I was analyzing something like somebody's website or their Instagram account or their social media. So yeah, to answer your question, it's sort of yes. The elements are going to be all of the different things that apply to your argument that icon does or did, right? So that could be giving speeches. That could be the way their style. I mean, it's not unlike a subculture analysis in the sense that you're thinking about what subcultures do, but does that answer your question?
Does it have to be like positive or negative, like depending on how the society reacts to whatever they do?
It could, well, you are making an argument, and it is going to be evaluative in the sense that you do want to make an argument about whether they are having some sort of productive effect or some sort of problematic effect.
Because the person I'm thinking about, like half of America does not like this person, but the other half does. So like it's
well, who is it?
The current president, Donald Trump.
Okay.
It's very iconic right now, and I know it's very subjective whether what they're doing is for good or the better, for good or worse.
Well, so here's the thing. Yeah. So the paper, if you're writing the icon paper, by the way, if you guys don't have, this thing might shut off in like a minute. So I apologize for that. It's good to see everybody. I'll be uploading this recording to Canvas. If you want to stick around for further discussion, I can start another Zoom in case this thing shuts off. I'm not sure if it will or won't. But if it does, good to see everybody. If you have further questions, send me a quick email or send me a chat message here in Zoom, and we can continue talking. Otherwise, I'll continue talking. But if you're good to go, you're welcome to sit in and listen to this conversation, or it's up to you. But you no longer have to be here anymore if you don't want to. Good to see you. Much love. Stay strong. Stay up, etc. and so forth. But to answer your question, Marie, so Donald Trump, or with any icon paper, you're not, again, this goes back to that point about criticism, right? You're not just simply proposing your opinion of Donald Trump, right? Everybody's got their own opinion of Donald Trump, right? So, and you talk to one person, they think Donald Trump's the best thing to happen to politics. You talk to another person, they think Donald Trump is the worst thing to happen to politics. So instead, what you're doing is you need to be thinking about, and this is why that social issue thing is important, how has Donald Trump affected some sort of social issue in our society, right? So maybe I want to make an argument about how Donald Trump and his rhetoric has only inflamed racial tensions and racial division in our society. Maybe I want to make an argument about how Donald Trump has augmented and improved the power structure of the president. So I'm not just saying like, oh, Donald Trump's a jerk, or oh, Donald Trump's the greatest thing ever, a hero. I am analyzing how he is having some sort of effect upon a social issue. And that effect could be a positive or productive effect. It could also be a a counterproductive or problematic effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, one thing you could say, I mean, one thing's for sure, right, is that Donald Trump has created a very, I mean, I think almost everybody would agree that he's definitely created a very ideologically driven society, right? A lot of us are very, a lot of people are very passionate, somewhat suddenly about, you know, I guess he's a polarizing figure. So, right, it's like you're either a Trump lover or a Trump hater.
Mhm.
I mean, there's also millions of people who, you know, like just don't. So one thing he's done is he's made our society very ideological, right? It's like, are you Republican? And more than that, are you a Trumpian or are you a never Trumper? It's like there's only two choices, you know, and that's kind of problematic. That leads to very little effective, complex conversation. But of course, I'm making an argument here, and so, you know, so.
Mhm.
But I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So when you're writing about an icon, it isn't just like saying like, well, this person sucks.
Right.
Even if you feel that way, you want, or you think this person's great, you need to be more specific as to why you think this person is having a damaging influence, or why this person is having a very productive influence on society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice, Jay. Who's the little guy there?
Oh, hey, how you doing? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it's my dog. Just call him Jay Jr. for the sake of this class.
Jay Junior.
But no, really, his name is Cuco. It's a
Okay,
Chihuahua dog.
I can
Very
see
nice
that.
dog.
Yeah. Nice.
By nice dog, he's not a nice dog. He's a really
Oh,
mean dog, but he
okay.
loves us. He loves us, right? You can see,
Well,
right?
that's what's important.
Right.
Yo, so I can write my essay about space.
Kenny.
Space as in like outer space?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to need to narrow that down. You would want to write about like, why do you think space exploration, if this is the way you're going, maybe I'm misreading it, because I haven't had a chance to read through the Brainstorm thing yet, but if you're talking about why space exploration matters, or the concept of space matters, how does it have some sort of social effect or social value? Obviously, space exploration has been used as a way to, has been used politically. Like it was a big deal who was the first person in space. The Russians beat us to it, and that was very upsetting for Americans, or not all Americans, but in other words, like, I don't want you just to write a long poem about space. You need to be writing a critical analysis and argument as to why that shit matters in our society.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the same game. I know. It seemed like maybe and I know you weren't here at the beginning, but I did make it so you can write about whatever you want, but you're still writing
About it has to be a critical analysis, so I got to connect it to something social.
Yeah, I know you hate me for that, Rashid, but I love the hate, man. I eat it up. But I mean, honestly, like my first two thoughts would be with that. I mean, initially I would just normally say like, no, you can't, but because it's a no pun intended, it's a vast topic. But like, you know, what's that?
What a funny guy.
Yeah. But here's the thing, like, you want to think about like what kind of role does it play in society? There's two things I could think of. Like, one is,
can you just give me a good example of something to write about then?
well, that's why you have that M3 icon assignment.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to write about, like, I don't know, do you have like, I mean, I know you're an athlete. Do you have like a sports, like an athlete who's a hero of yours? I mean, do you have a favorite album, favorite movie? Do you have a favorite? I mean,
well, I could do it on music. again? I could do another music one.
You can do it on whatever you want.
Oh, I'm gonna do another music one.
Well, there you go. Yeah, for sure. You could do that.
All right, thank you.
And you could do it like on an artist. Like, let's say you really wanted to do it on Kendrick Lamar or something, or you really wanted to do it on
Carrie or Hannah Montana.
yeah, exactly.
Hannah Montana. Let's go, dude. What we need out here.
I would love a paper on Hannah Montana. I know very little about her. I mean, I know that it's a cartoon or whatever, but
Cartoon, dude. I
That's
can't.
cartoons.
isn't it a cartoon?
No.
Oh, it's
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life.
It's it's a way of life. Let's go, dude. Let's go.
Is it like real? Is it real actors?
Yeah, it's Miley Cyrus and all these other
Oh God, yeah. Sorry. No, you know what I was thinking of? I was thinking of Dora the Explorer.
people. Oh, that's okay. I don't know.
That's some. I should stop this recording, by the way. Let me stop the recording real quick. People are like, "What?"